Okay, welcome to Into the Channel, a podcast primarily about women's football. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, come kick it with us already. Subscribe, follow YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. I am your host, Dino DeCespedes, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. What is up, man?
I'm feeling fantastic, buddy. We're back. Match week 20 is nearly upon us. We got some big picture topics to discuss, and I'm ready to chop it up with you.
I'm ready. Where do you want to get started?
Well, first I'm going to get started with a celebratory beer.
Oh, almost forgot. That's my bad.
You know what? It has to be done.
Yes, it does.
Nice.
Cheers.
Cheers to you. Let's start, as is custom, with your Orlando pride. As we progress through the season and they continue to win, or just at least not lose, I think every match of theirs is pretty much becoming the match of the week, and this one's certainly the match of the week. Your Orlando Pride versus the Kansas City Current in Orlando on Friday night.
An absolute banger. Friday, Orlando, 8 p.m., first in the table versus third in the table. Obviously, you mentioned it. Orlando on a historic run, unbeaten. Now we're at 19, and an 8-match win streak, and then a current 6-match win streak. This is not unbeaten. These are win streaks where they're just kind of mowing teams down. Obviously, we were pretty hot on KC early in the season. Where's your head at? Where are your expectations for this KC Current side now coming to Orlando, obviously to take on the juggernauts that are the Orlando Pride?
You know, my mind goes back to that big match right before the Olympic break on July 6th. Where your Orlando Pride was able to win 2-1 at Kansas City in an eventful match where they were down to 10 players for the entire second half, and they're still able to gut out a win. I think if you're Kansas City, you have to look at this match now in Orlando and say, how are we going to figure out a way for our defense to hold up against this just ruthless Orlando attack?
Yeah, obviously they made one change. Alma Schultz, the German goalkeeper, I guess we'll be making her third start. We'll see what the lineups look like, but I think that was an important change for them. I mean, 80 Franch, obviously this is a pro 80 Franch podcast enterprise, however you want to think about that, but obviously had her struggles. I don't think that's the only issue with their defense. I think they tend to scramble and chase a lot. There just always seems to be kind of free runners that they're a yard or two behind trying to play catch up on. You brought up that July 6th match against KC. So the wild part about that was actually roughly 67, 68 days ago as of recording time right now. We're recording Wednesday night. That was the last time the Orlando Pride gave up a goal in NWSL play. It's been almost 10 weeks. And on that one play, it required Temwa Chawinga taking the ball 50-plus yards, beating Emily Sams, beating Kylie Strom, beating Anna Morehouse. And you mentioned it. The red card is still not enough. Orlando walks away with a big 2-1 win.
That Chawinga goal, like you said, she picks the ball up at midfield. I mean, on their defensive side of the halfway line. She just completely shakes off Carrie Lawrence, who was just having a hell of a day trying to guard Chawinga pretty much from jump. Picked up her first yellow in the 14th minute, leading to that second yellow eventually to get the red card and get out of there. But I think for KC, and we've talked about it, and you identified this relatively early, it's obviously important to have a great singular goal scorer, like to know, like, this is our ace. This is the person who we're going to give the ball to. But if you're not able to attack from like a bunch of different angles, then you can be in real trouble. Now, I don't think that's necessarily the case with KC. They obviously have Dabinia. DiBernardo is good in the midfield. They're getting Bia Zanerato back, so that's obviously going to help kind of change some of the geometry of the field. But they gotta try to get the ball to Chawinga in dangerous areas, or at least in some space, because I guess you could give the ball to her on your own half of the field, and just if she has space, she can still get to where she needs to go. But Orlando's defense just makes you play the ball in areas that you don't want to be in. And I think they got to try to figure out some way to solve that. And that is, I was not aware that was the last goal scored against Orlando in league play. To have that goal be scored by Temwa Chawinga, if you're going to give up one goal in 2 months in league play, that might as well be the player you give it up to.
And what she was able to do on that goal, indefensible, that play. No. And Morehouse still gets a hand on it.
Yeah.
Sam still was within a couple inches of, kind of like dispossessing. This Pride defense, I'm glad you brought up Carrie Lawrence too, because after that KC match, it's now been 3 straight matches of the same back four: Carrie Abello, Emily Sams, Kylie Strom, Corey Dyke.
Mm-hmm.
So for this team to only have allowed 1 goal in the past 7 matches, I mean, how do we even contextualize that? Even like like it's funny, we like lose our minds over Barcelona. Even Barcelona gives up goals and makes it like somewhat interesting against competition not quite at this level. This defense as a unit, as dominant as I've seen any kind of unit, like even maybe the KC offense, like at the beginning of the season, I still would probably put this Orlando defense ahead of them, just because, like you said, they make it really impossible. I asked Seb Hines about this. They take away the passing lanes. They pressure the ball. They're super physical. They're super smart. And they're super in sync. So it kind of seems like the only way they're going to get beat is by some Chewinga magic or some Bia magic or some Dabinia magic.
Yeah.
The last quick note I want to hit, obviously, shout out to the Shades of Blue Shady Gang. You already know what time it is. But Tom Baum brought this up. Claire Hutton. Like, I'm not sure.
Big.
Maybe outside of Utah, but then Utah also has added some players, to kind of make things interesting. But you could make the case, and I think Tom was making that case, that KC misses Claire Hutton more than any team misses any other U20 player. And the gap might not even be that small.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, she started 16 to 17 matches that she's appeared in. She has more than 1,400 minutes played. Mm-hmm. And then, courtesy of our pals over at FootMob, she's in the 88th percentile in aerial duels won, in the 92nd percentile in defensive actions, players of similar position. I mean, she's just been incredibly consistent. You just put her in the lineup and she's able to play well with all those kind of star players. I think if you are Vlatko and you're game planning for this, you have to look at your team and be like, you just got to be as physical as possible. And Orlando was racking up the yellow cards in our first match. Like, let's not do anything crazy. I mean, Carrie Lawrence's red card on Temuat Chewinga was a bad foul. I mean, she leaves her feet. She slide tackles. It's from terrible behind. She doesn't get anywhere near the ball. You don't want that if you're Kansas City. And obviously you don't want to play to injure anybody. But your only shot is to play as physical as possible with the talented Brazilian contingent, and then obviously Barbara Benda.
Playing physical against Orlando is also pretty tough because they've got some dogs on that team.
Oh yeah,
tough to say. I mean, there's really no good recipe, but I have to imagine if you're KC, you have players like DiBernardo, Labonta, Chewinga, Bia coming back, maybe Dabinia. If I'm Vlatko, I'm probably letting all of those attacking players know. Let it rip. Let it rip. We've got to manufacture a goal or maybe 2 goals where there wasn't one, maybe from a little bit of a low XG kind of position. But we just need to put shots on frame just into the mix. And then on the flip side, defensively, can they hold up?
Yeah.
Because especially when you think about a Carrie Abello, you think about a Barbara Banda, even Martel.
Yeah, of course.
Just leave it at her. She'll mix it up, absolutely. And then that back line is like, you're not going to out-muscle them. They have a nasty streak. Like, these aren't the more finesse type players. These are physical players. Even when you go back and watch that Chewinga goal, every defender was livid when they gave up that goal. It wasn't the head and hands. It was like handfuls of hair, and they're just like, ugh, like, why? It's just the level of intensity off the charts as well. I'm super excited for this one.
Yeah, and I think Kansas City has to be prepared for that, right? Like, when you have the ball in the final third, in Orlando's defensive third, the midfielders are going to track back, and they're going to challenge you too.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny you point out, I think you're 100% right. Orlando's defense, absolutely the most dominant unit in the league, if we want to kind of break them down by units. I think you mentioned, KC's offense, especially early in the year, KC's attack. I think Gotham's attack, as the year has progressed, is probably one of the elite units. But then at worst, the 3rd or 4th best unit in the league is also Orlando's attack. So, I would not place a wager on Kansas City getting a win in Orlando, but I've been wrong in the past, so we'll see how it goes. In fact, if I had to bet a few of my hard-earned ducats one way, I think I might go for the Orlando outright win.
I like it. Probably get a decent number on that. Quick
Both
note on
teams to
Casey.
score, no.
Oh no, why? I think I could see both teams scoring. I went on my whole Dabinia Bia, firepower rant, and we're scoring. Last quick note: that KC offense, obviously missing a lot of players, a lot of changes. The beginning of the season now feels like an eternity ago, but now that's 4 straight matches with just 1 goal. Lost 3 of those 4. The 1 win was over Utah with no Ali Sentnor in a game that was pretty well contested, we'll say. So I'm going to say I wouldn't be shocked if they won.
Sure.
And I think you look at Orlando, their last match. This was at Chicago against a defensive-minded team. They outpossessed Chicago 61-39, and they outshot them 15-3. But the finishing not quite there. Only 2 of their 15 were on target. So if you can catch Orlando on that similar kind of day, I know they're a different team at home for sure. And if you could create some magic offensively and have the game be in the balance late into the match, I think that is probably the recipe. But even still, it's got to be big uphill battle for that KC team, especially with Claire. I mean, it's crazy to talk about an 18-year-old like that. But Claire Hutton, I think, just is that important to that squad.
Yeah, 100%. Again, I don't mean to talk about Kansas City like they're a giant underdog. They have a ton of skill on their side. It's just, what have we seen from Orlando that we need to really, really be questioning? They've had great goalkeeping, and we've talked about the defense, the skill in the midfield, just the passing in the midfield, just to open up Banda moving forward. Julie Doyle playing in crosses. It's just there's just no relief anywhere on the field. I want to go back real quick while they're playing with 10 players on July 6th. So Kansas City, obviously, they had 1 more player on the field. They're able to hold 67% of the ball. They had 15 total shots. Only 4 of those were on target. And they had, according to our pals at FootMob, again, they had 0 big chances. Orlando, with only 33% of the ball, had 8 total shots. 2 of them were on target, and they had 2 big chances. Because even when they were a player down, you could get Banda into space, and she can take on any defender on any team in any league. And the last number I want to hit is in that second half, Orlando committed 4 fouls to Kansas City committing 8 fouls. And Orlando was the team with fewer players on the field. So that even goes to show, you talk about Seb Hines and his influence and the group defending that they do. They're just a wildly smart team too. Like you said on Shades of Blue, shout out to our guys again. If you're thinking about the absolute best clubs in the world, Barcelona, Chelsea, Lyon, and a similarly beautiful city, Orlando.
Hell yeah. I mean, I keep hitting this stat because it's I think the first time I brought it up, it might have been 6 or 7 weeks ago. Actually, 6 or 7 match weeks ago, we'll say. Orlando was maybe 12 matches played and 11 goals given up. It was somewhat equitable in terms of what they've given up in the matches played. Now they're at 12 goals allowed in 19 matches.
It's crazy.
In other sports, you'll see teams over-index maybe on defense or on offense or on transition or whatever. Orlando just seems to be better than you at all of them, kind of in controlling, turning defense into offense from the midfield, their backline, and then their attack. Doesn't mean they can't have an off day. As we get later into the season, will they be able to get through the pressure of being undefeated? Other squads have kind of experienced injuries, some personnel stuff. Sometimes in the front office, there's stuff that can kind of derail things. Orlando's had a great season from that standpoint.
100%. Yeah. I mean, shout out, obviously, Haley Carter, the GM of Orlando Pride. And we've talked about Seb Hines a lot. It's just a culture up and down that entire structure. I know that's a term that gets overused. I know we talk about the Miami Heat on this podcast some as well. But that's real, man. You work in a company or you work in an organization that works well together and has a plan and a cohesive vision. That's how you attain success. And in this field, not to mention maybe the best striker in the world.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny when you mention the culture, because something that you see quite a lot in football, when a winger takes an ill-advised shot and then the forward does the what are you doing here? It's I don't know that I've seen that at all this season, from an Orlando player. It just seems to be all positive, all trust. And like you mentioned, the intensity, the attitude, the culture, that shit's real. You're in the building and you really can feel it.
Yeah, man. Maybe it's corny or whatever. I just don't think like winning habits is a dumb cliche. I think it's a real thing that exists in like whatever field you're in.
Hell yeah, for sure. Apologies, bro. I'm going to put you on the spot. I want to see if you got a prediction. Orlando KC. I'm going to make one. I hadn't thought about this, so I'm going to go off the dome as well. But I'll kick it to you first.
2-0 Orlando.
Ooh.
I think you've talked about the arrow with Kansas City. I wanted to slow you down a little bit on their arrow pointing down. They're going to be a top 4 team. They're going to host a playoff match. They'll probably win that playoff match. They have great players. Like, I went back and watched that. I know there are some things that are different. You mentioned the keeper change, and while this is a pro 80 Franch podcast, that keeper change was probably warranted, understandable. But like you said, Orlando's a different beast at home. They're just playing too well right now. And when you think about the trust, they trust each other because they all hit perfect passes all the time to each other. So yeah, they trust each other. So give me 2-0 Orlando, and Benda gets at least one. I think that's obvious. And I'm gonna say Carriabello goal. I'm going defender goal for the second one.
I like it. Well, that's why I trust you, bro. Like, it's good pass. It's clean passing. I don't have to worry about that. I know you're going to kick it right back to me. I'm kicking it right back to you. I'm debating here. I'm going to go 2-2.
Wow.
A little bit of a shootout. I think Kansas City, it's not quite back against the wall, but, you lost to this team who was down to 10 at home. Now it's like you lose this one. Granted, you're on the road. It's pretty clear that you're not at the level.
Yeah.
If you go in there, you kind of get waxed a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's got to fuck with you mentally going down the stretch run, going into the playoffs where you're just like, okay, we're sort of drawing dead. We really have to kind of make a stand here. Big time matchup for them. And you got to remember, first half of the season, it was almost like KC's title to lose.
Sure.
That's just what it was for the first month and a half, I'll say. So I like 2-2 here.
I don't want to accuse you of being scared. But, Kansas City's given up 28 goals, and now they have to go play against Benda, Marta, Angelina, Adriana, Julie Doyle. We'll see how that goes. But all right, it's on wax now. We'll see how it goes. And, I tend to swing wildly one way or the other. So maybe my 2-0, maybe I'm being too aggressive, and it's just easy for me without a rooting interest in this match to just be like, they're going to crush them.
Both teams to score plus 220. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know the actual number, but
there it
probably
is.
Pretty tasty. I don't know. Go check it out. Let's go ahead. We're going to introduce, I will say, an expansion of a vehicle that we've used here at the ITC. We each brought to the table one NWSL squad that we believe has the arrow pointing up and one NWSL squad that has the arrow pointing down. So with that said, Mr. Grand Angle, who is your very first installment of arrow pointing up in the game that is poised to be sweeping the nation, arrow pointing up or arrow pointing down?
You gotta love an arrow pointing in some direction. Everybody will be shocked. Arrow pointing up, Seattle Reign FC. Now,
let's go.
You might ask yourself, is this an obvious choice for your boy? Yes. But is it also absolutely incontrovertibly correct? Yes, it is. And I'll tell you why. So, all right. Reign FC has won its last 3 matches, the last 2 being 3-2 victories over Racing Louisville and Angel City, respectively, both on the road. I'll also say it is funny how 3 consecutive wins can change the narrative of your entire season. I've heard a few announcers and a few pundits point out that the Reign haven't lost a league match in 7 matches, a streak dating back to their June 9th loss at Kansas City. But as somebody who was in the room with some of the players and with Laura Harvey during that stretch where there were 4 draws in the league preceding these 3 wins, those did not always feel like happy draws.
Sure.
The club was kind of inching along 1 point at a time. But speaking of points and an arrow pointing, why do I think, aside from these 3 wins in a row, why is the arrow pointing up? Because a lot of stuff changed. On August 5th, Seattle Reign FC signed Anna Maria Crnogorcevic, the 33-year-old attacker. She previously played with FFC Frankfurt, played for the Portland Thorns. She played for Barcelona in 22-23, where she had 8 goals and 6 assists in Liga F, and that was en route to the club winning a continental treble. That year, they won Liga F, they won the Supercopa, and they won the UEFA Women's Champions League. Crnogorcevic, she had 2 goals and 2 assists in 9 matches. Every time Seattle Reign had those bad draws or we're racking up some losses early in the season, Laura Harvey just kept saying, we just do not have the quality in the final third. We just don't have the quality in really important areas when we're trying to make that last pass. Serena Gorsevic, you put her on the field, and that immediately upgrades it. And Ji So-yeon obviously was a Chelsea staple for a long time. Serena Gorsevic had shown her quality over years and years of play. Even though they had never played with each other before, just having both of them on the field at the same time just creates there's just a natural connection between two players who are just absolute geniuses out there. I think that she's going to prove herself as maybe one of the most important transfers for any club across the NWSL in for the second half of the season.
I could definitely see that. She's just a professional striker. She's a professional scorer, in that vein. And I remember, obviously, Orlando before Banda, joins. I remember last season, Messiah Bright, and obviously she goes over to Angel City, and I was kind of bummed because I was like, not at the Banda level, but a player that physically can take up space, create a lot of gravity, open some stuff up. But having a player that is smart and can manipulate the defense, not just kick it into the back of the net. Yep. I mean, it's massive, and then you have a player like G. I don't know, is she the most accurate? She could just put the ball any spot, that goal that G scored.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Frozen goalkeeper moment, he's like, okay, the goalkeeper's like, okay, I know G's probably going top left here, just frozen, and then it ends up top right fastball. She's basically like the Greg Maddux of the NWSL, just puts it wherever she wants. And a player that is absolutely going to have her game raised by a Serena Gorsevic.
Yeah, 100%. And if I may, I will make a motion on the ITC podcast. Can we start calling her Cerno?
I don't see why not.
I love a nickname.
Cerno. I like it.
All right. I've also seen people abbreviate, because it's Ana Maria Serena Gorsevic, AMC. Pretty good. Like that one as well.
We don't have an AMC, do we? Outside of the theater.
Yeah, not that I can think of. So yeah, I think either of those can work. Serena Gorsevic, fun to say though, I will say. Okay, so you inject instant quality, instant experience, calmness to kind of patrol, and she's just been dynamite helping with the build-up play. We haven't seen her scoring goals, in any loads themselves yet, but just the build-up play is just way better with her out there. And then the other addition that they made, I know we've talked about some of this before, but this is now that we've seen it on the field, this is what contributes to the arrow pointing firmly in the up direction. On August 19th, Seattle Reign FC traded Bethany Balser to Racing Louisville for midfielder Jalen Howell. Now, that was pretty serious business because, as I had said at the time, you couldn't find a player or a staffer or Laura Harvey herself to ever say a bad word about Bethany Balser. She is loved and respected in that organization, still is. She's a professional. She's a goal scorer. She was the only one scoring goals for Seattle in that bad run in the beginning of the season. So for them to make that decision to say, okay, we got to shake the snow globe on this attack, and we're going to bring in Jalen Howell, a little more of a defensive-minded midfielder, have her in some kind of rotation with Jess Fishlock and Quinn, and the attack is completely night and day. And this is not to take anything away from Balser, who, again, I will say, was the only one scoring goals for Reign for what felt like months. But the combination of Jordan Huitema, Bethany Balser, and Ziara King was just not quite working in the final third. So now you have the addition of Howell, the addition of AMC. Then the team also brings in Narilia Coco Mondesir, a 25-year-old Haitian forward from Montpellier. And now, even though I think we had talked about it previously on this podcast, Laura Harvey told me Coco needs to kind of build up some physicality to play in this league long term. But now she's just dropping Coco in 25 minutes, 20 minutes at the end of matches. And now you get another injection of quality, of obvious smarts and cleverness. I mean, the attack is just night and day compared to where it was.
It's wild how that can happen. And I think that's just a testament to chemistry. Even Ziara King, who you mentioned, looks like a different player. I think things are opening up. The passing's getting a little better. And then Bethany Balser, to your point, hasn't looked bad in Louisville.
Yeah.
I think, she's been effective. She's notched an assist so far in 3 matches there. A very fitting first arrow pointing up. I want to, as my arrow pointing up squad, I'm going to go with my playoff pick, Bay FC.
There we go.
I like to think about these things with regard to was there a turning point? And I think as simple and as basic as this might sound, but bringing on Abby Dahlkamper, pairing her up with Emily Menges, I think that could be one of the moves of the window also. We talked in great detail about defensively, how bad things kind of were at BFC, and their manager Albertine Montoya, I think was quote on the telecast I'm paraphrasing here, having no interest in the draw, just wants to kind of run and gun. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose, and that's kind of just how it's going to be. Still not a draw to be seen for this BFC side. So I like the way they play. Dahlkamper, obviously she scores in her debut for BFC in their 3-1 bullying of the Portland Thorns. Then they clean sheet Racing Louisville 1-0. I went back and watched the Portland BFC match. Before that match, they showed a graphic. Portland was in 5th. Mm-hmm. BFC was in 10th. This was 2 matches ago. Now it feels completely flipped upside down. Portland's in 6th. Bay's in 7th. Not a huge gap between the two. And I kind of love, I just jotted this down in my notes, Albertine Montoya's approach of we're either going to win or we're going to lose, and I don't care. It's almost like the 3-point revolution of the NWSL, the same way that Steph and Clay were the 3-point NBA. It's we don't want a bunch of draws and just stack a bunch of give me the 3. That's fine. We'll live with that rather than stacking up all these ones out here. I'm into Bay. I think the arrow's pointing up there. Let me know if I'm crazy.
You're not crazy. It's one of my greatest regrets in this season of podcasts that we've been doing is that I know I talked about it before, but when we were on Loud and Proud Orlando, which you should instantly subscribe to and watch, Great Orlando Pride podcast, I said I thought Bay FC could get into the playoffs. And then 2 weeks ago, I was a huge coward and then totally backed away from them because of the defense, while also saying I like the Abby Dahlkamper addition. So I think you're right. I mean, you bring on Dahlkamper. She has national team experience. She obviously can lead you. She's a veteran player. And you still have Asisa Oshwala and Rachel Kuninaji up there. Mm-hmm. They can carry you through games. You talk about that 3-point revolution. They can just rack up 3-pointers for you by themselves.
Absolutely. And I think I'm glad you brought up Kuninaji because she seems to be figuring out this league with every passing week.
Yes.
She's like, okay, you want to play me this way? I'm going to draw some people out and I'm going to put a nasty cross right into the box. And it's just going to be a tap in for a goal. And we're going to separate ourselves that way. She's clearly becoming a winning player. I don't need my numbers. I don't need the goals. I don't need the highlights. We need to win. And to win, it's going to require different moves in different spots. So she's playing definitely her best ball, I think, in the league so far. That match against Racing Louisville, just to kind of switch gears back to the defense really quick, Louisville managed 1 shot on target out of 11 versus that Bay defense. And I think that's kind of quickly becoming my favorite stat is you might be able to get shots off, but how many were you able to put on target? Because that's going to tell me how much space you had, how much time you had, what your options were. I mentioned watching that Bay FC Portland matchup 2 weeks ago. There was a moment that was really interesting because Bay FC pretty much decided in that match, we're going to sell out. We're not going to let Sophie Smith beat us. We're just simply not. Yep. She touches the ball, we're going to be on her. You brought up, the a little bit of a howler in terms of how Smith did get that 1 goal on basically the gift.
Yeah.
But there was a really prescient moment in that one where Smith's got a little bit of space, perfect position, right at the edge of the box, and just gets immediately swarmed by multiple Bay FC defenders. Quicker than you would imagine. I think Smith thought she had more time than she did. Gets closed down immediately. She's got an outlet to Sam Coffey, who is not Sophie Smith from the edge of the box, but it has to take a rip on it because she gets the ball in a dangerous area. She's got to look and doesn't get anywhere near any kind of threatening with her strike. I just thought that play really encapsulated a new approach for Bay FC. Let's crank up the intensity. We can't cover every spot on the field, but let's pick our spots where we're going to drive, we're going to shut down opportunities, and we're going to hope that on the backside our rotations are good enough to kind of cover.
And that fits when you have 2 superlative attackers up front. Mm-hmm. So we'll sell out, we'll play help defense, we'll try to cut it off, and then we'll try to get the ball up as fast as possible, and then let the 2 superstars kind of take us from there. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I just firmly agree with you. It feels like arrows pointing up for Bay.
I like it. So just to give a little bit of a preview for what's going on this weekend. So Seattle Reign, your team, who's got the arrow pointing up, they will be in action Monday night. Monday Night Football action. How about that? Mm-hmm. They host Gotham FC September 16, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. And my arrow pointing up team, Bay FC, they will travel to Cary, North Carolina, take on the Courage. They kick off the weekend, Friday night, 7 p.m. September 13th, for some not even this table, but like mid-playoff, jockeying. I think that's going to be a really, really interesting matchup and a great style matchup.
Yeah, big implications in that one. North Carolina is good at home. I think that one's going to be a must-watch.
Hell yeah. All right. So those are the arrows pointing up. Got a couple arrows pointing down. Who earned, in your book, in your personal record book, the dubious distinction of being the first ever arrow pointing down team in the history of the ITC?
Sure. So I want to say, well, we try to be positive people on this podcast. So let me take you on a little bit of a journey here. I am going to go with Portland Thorns FC as my arrow pointing down team.
Let's go. Spider-Man meme.
Okay. You're the same?
Yeah, I got Portland.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So tell me, how in lockstep we are. I do have a little something at the end here. But, they haven't registered a point in 3 matches since returning from the Olympic break. That made me think the arrow's pointing down. So they had a 2-0 loss coming out of the break to Gotham FC on August 24th. They lost 3-1 at home to Bay FC, as you referenced earlier. That was on August 31st. And then they had that 2-1 loss away to Washington Spirit on September 7th, which I have to think is the worst Portland loss to a Magic Johnson team since the 91 Western Conference Finals.
Excellent.
So now they're sitting at 6th in the table, and they're only 3 points ahead of Bay FC, like you mentioned. So usually I would say losses away to the Bats and away to the Spirit are nothing to panic over. And I think there's also some additional context needed in that loss to Gotham. They didn't have Sophie Smith and Sam Coffey or freshly signed Australian goalkeeper Mackenzie Arnold. They're coming off of the Olympic break there. And the tricky thing about playing Gotham FC is that they opted for like semi-rest for their starters. So Neiswanger and Sonnet played in the first half of that match. Rose Lavelle played in the second half. And they had just added Jess Carter, who was freshly, put into the lineup and deployed to terrorize attacking players all over the NWSL. Not to mention, Gotham also had a rested Ella Stevens, Yasmin Ryan, and Brunina waiting in the wings. So am I being a little harsh on Portland for the arrow pointing down? Maybe a little, but still 3 straight losses in a row. That's really tough.
Yeah, man, totally agree with you. Those 3 losses, Portland outscored 7-2. Not great. Yeah. And they've lost 4 of 6. So in their last 6 matches, just 4 goals and 4 points. Not a great setup. I think when you look a little bit deeper, Sophie Smith, who we've talked a lot about on this show, MVP numbers, 11 goals, 6 assists on the season. And then it's a huge fall off from there. I think with this Portland side, you can kind of sell out a little bit on Sophie Smith.
Yeah. And
I think I saw that. We're watching this, rewatching this Bay FC matchup. Olivia Moultrie, Janine Becky, they're second on the team, 3 goals each. Hina Sugita, second on the team with 3 assists. So Sophie Smith outpacing pretty much the entire squad. And I think defenses are really, really starting to adjust to that. The other thing I wanted to mention, Rob Gale comes in April 16th as the interim manager. The Thorns go on to win 6 straight and 7 of 8. Absolute tear at that point. The bounciest of new manager bounces. Then Rob Gale awarded the permanent job July 19th, and the Thorns go on to lose their next 3 matches.
That's tough.
Correlation, causation, who knows? I mean, I'm not saying that, Rob Gale is not going to be a successful manager in this league or for this franchise, but just an interesting observation. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, maybe Rob wanted to keep his options open. Maybe he liked the interim tag. Who knows? But I think, we kind of saw that with this Portland team from the start of the season. Like, they started the season, they lose 2 in a row. They had that big loss to Kansas City where they were trying to fight back in the opening match of the season, which was just a fireworks show. They lose 5-4 at Kansas City. But, I mean, they started the season 0 wins, 1 draw, and 3 losses before they ripped off a bunch of those wins in a row. So there appears to be some streakiness to this team. This is where I'd like to implement my little bit of a twist here. I think there's too much damn negativity in this world. So I will say, yes, are they my first ever arrow pointing down team as long as we're doing this as a segment? Yes, they are. But do I think that arrow will remain pointing down? No, I do not. I want to bet on the streakiness. I think they have too many good players, and I think what we should prepare ourselves for is their upcoming match on Friday night, NWSL After Dark in Portland versus the Chicago Red Stars.
Oof.
You mentioned where these teams are on the table. Portland Thorns sitting in 6th on 27 points. Chicago Red Stars sitting in 8th on 23 points. This is absolutely huge for Portland, I think. I think at home, I think you have to win this match. So streaks be damned. They have to come out here and end that streak on Friday. And if they don't, then that arrow it's pointing further down. If that could even be possible. But I would also want to posit if the team is very, very streaky. Rewinding all the way back to our season preview, I did pick this team to win the NWSL championship because I had faith in them to win 3 matches in a row in a playoff scenario. Even if they lose to Chicago, I can still hold on to my preseason pick and just say, okay, they're going to get all these losses out of the way in the streak. They'll make the playoffs, and then they'll get streaky in the right direction, arrow pointing up at the right time. So the take is still protected.
Love it. Every base covered. I mean, seems logical to me. I like it. And I love that you brought a twist. I also brought a twist.
Let's go.
And I brought a twist I think you're going to like. Obviously, my arrow pointing up team is Bay FC. My arrow pointing down team is Portland. Now, we're going into match week 20. So every team's got 7 matches left on the schedule. The Portland Thorns, currently in 6th place, play only one team ahead of them in the standings.
There we go.
In 7 matchups. So if they're going to turn it around, the schedule gods have shown down on them. Might be a great, great time for that. We'll get 2/3 of a triple espresso in action. NWSL After Dark. That'll be a fun head-to-head matchup when they go against Chicago. On the flip side, my arrow pointing up team, Bay FC, 5 out of their next 7 are against teams ahead of them in the standings. They're currently sitting in 7th. So not an easy run for this Bay FC side, but I don't know. There's something still. I think the vibes are really, really good. They look better than they've looked all season. Great.
Oh, yeah.
To your point about Portland, maybe this being the start of a turnaround, great time to be kind of peaking. You can still carry a lot of that momentum into the playoffs. And as mentioned, they're in a playoff spot already.
Yeah.
And we talked about 2 weeks ago, they're in 10th. 4 teams between them and Portland, and now they've completely closed that gap.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm glad you bring up the 7 matches remaining. In a 26 match season, that's a little more than 25% of the season remaining. So To your point, there is a ton of jockeying to be done. It would appear that the NWSL scriptwriters have really gone in on this season because there's so much to be decided before we even get to the playoff time. So every week, you're going to get like 2 or 3 matches, and we're going to be sitting here going, this is going to go a long way to decide the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think the really interesting part, we talked about this maybe a month or so ago. It's like Orlando might be getting to a place where they're putting the Shield further and further out of reach.
Yep.
So if they're sitting in a spot where they're going to cruise to the Shield, which is not unreasonable, it becomes about the playoffs and seeding. And a lot of these teams like a Portland, like a North Carolina, maybe like a Bay FC, probably already are in that, hey, let's right the ship so that when playoffs kick off and we're there, we're peaking.
100%, man. I'm locked in. It's going to be great, and it's going to take us right into the Champions League. It's just like you cannot get any better in this part of the football calendar.
Hell yeah. And speaking of, quick programming reminder, early next week, we will drop our Champions League Round 2 preview. Some massive, massive matchups, especially for your boys. Arsenal, BK Hacken, Manchester City, Paris FC, Real Madrid, Sporting CP, PSG, Juventus. Like, this is a loaded slate. You've got 24 teams that are going to be going all out over 2 legs to try to grab one of those group stage spots. We will be back early next week to pretty much just crack beers and get excited about the matches. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, that's the show. I mean, if you've been rocking with us this long, that's pretty much what we're doing here. So, yeah, I mean, just stars, big-time clubs, up-and-coming clubs, young players, crafty veterans. The tournament has every single thing you could possibly ask for as a football fan. I just cannot wait for round 2, even the first legs. Then you get to digest all that. Then you have a week until the second legs. It's just a fantastic tournament. I cannot wait for it to be back.
We're pretty much back. I mean, like
all the
way. We've sat at the restaurant. We've gotten our table. We put our drinks order in. We can see the appetizers just kind of slowly working their way over to our table. That was just about kicking back, letting the football wash over us, and enjoying another Champions League season. Very, very excited.
Yeah, and we had decided in our first Champions League preview that we were back And now I think we are upgraded. Now that we're past this and we're into round 2 of qualifying, I think we are so back.
We're so back. Yeah. Not quite back. Totally with you on that. Want to do a quick couple shout outs. Cali Texkin, who now goes by CTX.
Always.
Shout out. You already know what time it is. Blade Runner, you already know. MLS Architect, resurfacing after some Champions League talk. Great to have you back, Bard, Morton, the gang. It just feels like the gangs are getting back together. It's kind of like school season gets back in. You get to see all your buddies again. Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
I think that's it, man. Match week 20 in the NWSL. Primed to be excellent. Primed to be very interesting. So I'm ready to get to that on our way to the Champions League.
Let's go. All right, man. I think we did it. This has been another episode of Into the Channel. Sincere thank you. Thank you for watching, listening, following, liking, subscribing, just plain hanging out with your boys. And remember to like if you liked, and subscribe or follow Into the Channel, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials, every single one in the show notes of this episode. And a big thank you to my co-host as well, Mr. Grand Angle, for pretty much always having that arrow pointing up, bro. You already know what time it is. I appreciate you, man.
Up and to the right, man. It's the podcast viewership, the podcast subscribers. We always appreciate you guys. Thank you for rocking with us. Let us know, seriously, who do you have the arrow pointing up for? Who do you have the arrow pointing down for? Drop some knowledge for us. Let us know who we missed. We always appreciate you guys rocking with us, and we will talk to you next time.